fast. Welcome back, everyone. We are at the second roundtable, the formerly known as the Core Four, because Mr. Marshall Lewis is not going to grace us with his presence today, and I am very miffed, but I understand, Miles. We have been together. We have been together for 10 consecutive times without breaking the chain. This is the first time we're breaking the chain with our 11th appearance together. So first and foremost, I got to thank all three of you, Zaheer, Anil, and Elliott, for always answering my call when I asked you guys to do this. It means so much to me. It really, really does. And today it means even more because of a certain someone who we will stop talking about. But also, I want to thank my partner in crime, my co-pilot for Diamonds and Pearls Super Deluxe Virtual Celebration, Mr. Arthur, also known as 1/4 of the Music Snobs, the lead voice of
I
the music.
appreciate you inviting me back to join this illustrious group. This is it's always a pleasure to be amongst my brothers here.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's get started. And since Mouse is just like put a
So much shade.
yeah, sort of mix it up. And remember, my grandmother said, "Don't mix it up," but we're gonna mix it all up today, and I'm gonna switch up the questions. So we're gonna get started with the question actually that I asked you first when we did this for the Sound of Time Super Deluxe celebration. And the first question is, what are you most excited about with this Super Deluxe release, while also answering what you got and why? So let's start actually with Arthur.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Give me 1 second, no problem. Let me show you. Let me show
I could
you.
actually do that one. And D'Angelo usually hits me with the hard question first, so I asked her backstage to
Oh, most
reverse the
excited.
order. But
Yeah, I could go. So the thing that I was most excited about about the Super Deluxe is to have the opportunity to hear the process, anticipation of hearing the process of how we got from Love Sexy to Diamonds and Pearls. Um, we got clues, particularly in Graffiti Bridge. We got smatterings in Batman, but because Batman was a project, I don't really count that in that way. Um, because in 1989, 1990 even, we were still in the vapor of Love Sexy. And when we got to the MTV Awards, we went from saying yes and shouting Hunda Lacilia, and we got dropped into Caligula. And it seemed to be that this trajectory of a new spirituality, a new framework in which to express joy and the light, if you will, we crept back into the proverbial darkness that got the Black Album shelved, and we were in this other world. Now, MTV, I believe that performance preceded the release of Diamonds and Pearls, um, also with the Arsenio Hall performance. So you didn't really know yet what you were going to get from the album, but it still was a little jarring for me that he would switch it all the way up. And I was hoping, and in a lot of ways, I do hear that progression in the vault tracks of the SDE, where in a sense, he really went back home. I mean, quite literally, and he starts performing music that had influenced him in his career, that he later played more prominently in the last few releases of his career. And it was really good to see that. And I do feel that that desire to hear this progression was fulfilled for the most part.
All right, Zaheer, take it away.
Sure. So I had gone to the celebration in 2020. No, yes, 2021, 2022 when they did the Glam Slam. Yes, 2022 when they presented the Glam Slam video, synchronizing. Like they pulled just Prince's voice. I think Prince's voice, his guitar, and Rosie's voice out of the mix, and then the bands combined, all the musicians that were there played the rest live, and that was incredible. That was probably the most exciting, entertaining, engaging hybrid show, because they had done a few other kinds of hybrids before, and that was amazing. And so I was looking forward to getting that video, and the audio recording. That is just the way that that show is shot, and also the way that it's mixed, so you hear the audience. I feel like a lot of Prince's live releases, the mix on the audience is really low, and you don't get to hear the audience singing along or clapping or participating. And that energy is so necessary to understanding what's happening. So I was most looking forward to that Blu-ray and the audio. I got the special deluxe edition, and the Record Store Day Get Off re-release. That's pretty much it. I didn't get a whole lot this time around. Last time I think I was getting vinyl and CDs, but I felt like with the vinyl I was good. And besides the live set, I of course am always interested in the vault to get the releases, to get a sense of what else is going on in Prince's creative mind, as he is trying to distill all of the things that he is hearing in his head into a cohesive project.
All right, let's go with Elliott.
Okay. I'm going to give you two answers. The first is I was looking forward to the liner notes. So once I knew that you, D'Angelo, and Kanisa were going to be a part of this, I was like, well, I have to read this, right? Not only because I love y'all and I love y'all's work, but it is this really important component. And I didn't get a chance to really kind of talk about it because I was moderating the event just before this about sort of the liner notes and y'all being featured in that. But it is so important about the different kinds of perspectives that come with listening to Prince, right? And so, we have the kind of perspective of sort of industry folks. We have the music journalist side of things. We have a kind of archivist side of we also have the kind of archivist side of things. And so we get multiple bases covered, right? And those are often relying from the voices of people who worked with Prince, either as sort of musicians in MPG or again, sort of Warner Brothers or what have you. So we get all of those voices, but what is often missing is the voices from the fam. And you all were there and you all were representing. And that was so exciting, so powerful to see, to witness, to have. And so for me, that was one of the key things that I was looking forward to, is when I found that out, I was like, you picked the two greatest people to be a part of this. And so I want to give you another sort of shout out and really laud both of you for being a part of this historical moment. To add on to that, I was also very excited about the vault tracks for similar reasons that sort of Zaheer is talking about. I'm always excited about the vault tracks because I'm always interested in what didn't make it, what else was happening in the world, what else was happening during this period. in part because, right, I think as someone who does research and writing, there are things that make it and there are things that don't. And I'm always interested in the things that don't. And so here we have this moment with the vault tracks where we get that kind of sense of those things that didn't make it. But importantly about the vault tracks, right, we get Prince's version of things that other artists ended up doing, right? When he's writing for other folks, we get those kinds of things, right? Which we can call demos or proto demos or whatever you want to call them. That's also really interesting to me, in part because when I listen to, and I'm not going to go into specific songs right now, but when I listen to some of the vault tracks, I think about Prince's tone, right? And thinking like, well, is he already thinking in mind that this is going to go to a female artist, or is he just using falsetto? Like my mind is kind of taking a lot of notes in how Prince is crafting these sets of songs and who they might be for, who they might like. Those things are really important to me to think about, especially if we're talking about songs that, you know, sort of women artists have picked up, right? I think about how Prince is thinking about gender through voice and gender through sort of musicianship in that kind of crafting of these songs. So vault tracks mean a lot to me in that respect, because to be a bit academic, for me it's the kind of construction and production of gender sometimes when we think about Prince and his demos, especially those written for, you know, sort of female artists. So I think about those things in that kind of frame. To then just kind of tie a nice bow on it, I got the Super Deluxe, I got the CD version, because that is kind of my older kind of millennial thing. So I'll always gravitate toward the CDs. It's nothing against vinyl. I do have vinyl, but I'm always going to be that person who's like, oh, there's a CD version. Let me get the CD version. And so I wanted to make sure that was the one that I got, because that spoke, not only speaks to me now, but also speaks to me when the first pressing of, you know, Diamonds and Pearls came out, right? So like that's also me, you know, sort of during that period in the 91. So like that's really, I think the key thing for me is also that kind of speaking back to a younger form of myself.
Mm.
So much here, I think, echoes what everybody else has said. I'll just hit a couple of points. I mean, I got the CD set for, I think, all the same reasons Elliott just said, and you know, there's a shift even in my relationship to these sets now, right? Because like Sound of the Times was kind of like my album. That's the thing where I was like, you know, lined up and ready. 1999 is my second favorite album behind that. So it's a very, very different relationship to those. But in terms of my, you know, fandom for Prince, this was the album where it tipped for me. I was always a fan. Graffiti Bridge is actually the one where I was like, oh, this is my dude. Like, this is what I'm into. Like, this is who I want to see. And so right on the heels of that, to have this omnipresent, like he was everywhere doing everything. And so I remember, you know, like thinking about what the content was that was, I mean, a lot of the stuff that, you know, like I think like all of us, a lot of the stuff that was in the vault or that was even on the Blu-ray were things that I had seen or traded, you know, even back in the day, back in the 90s. But I remember very distinctly my folks having they were having friends over for a party on a Friday night. And that was when ABC was airing Prince doing the Special Olympics performance. And I'm, you know, and it's like we had one TV in the house, you know, one color TV, and I was standing in front of it like, I don't care who's here. I don't care, you know, like I know we got company, like, you know, that was not the done thing when folks were over, but I was just like, I'm going to watch this right now. So, and that DMTV performance was my birthday. You know, I remember it distinctly. Like, that's the day I turned 16 years old. So that was like a very, like, it was a really pronounced moment. And then the other part was he was cool again. You know, he had kind of fallen off for some folks, but like people were listening to music and doing stuff. So it was everything else of this era, more than just the album. But even like with the album, like it was the hologram, it was the packaging, it was the, you know, the mysteriousness of the liner notes. And so this set is about that for me, because I mean, if nothing else, to be able as a fan to send somebody a link to a playable version of Violet the Organ Grinder instead of start 30 years ago and find a CD, you know, and be like, this song goes and you can go listen to it. So I think that's this part, which is like, this is about legacy. I mean, this is why seeing, you know, D'Angelo, you and Kanisa, like people I love and respect that are part of our, you know, community, that are leaders in our community and guide us. It's like, okay, we're part of the story. Our the people that we love are part of the story. And then this is about, I think more explicitly about like trying to bring relevance to the legacy. I think the other big albums, the Purple Rains and 1999s, are just, you know, people like, yeah, that's the album that guy did. You know what I mean? Like the most casual fans heard of him is gonna be like, that's the thing. And this is the one where like, oh, I know the song. I don't know if I know the album. You know, like that's where it sort of tips, even for people who are like, oh, I'm into, you know, I respect him, or I watched the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame video, or whatever people tell you when they tell you that they're like, you know, pro Prince. This is the one where it's explicitly legacy burnishing. And I think it succeeds in that. And I think that's what I loved about seeing the songs in progress. I think that's there. I think the blending of stuff that might have been in originals, but instead is here, is really good. I think they've got more of a point of view about that. That is the legacy burnishing work that you do, where you don't say like, you're going to buy some other album where he puts the songs that he wrote for, you know, people or you know, other proteges or other artists. I think the centering and inclusion of Rosie Gaines on this is really incredible, including songs that she started writing before him. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen that expansiveness to the work. And then I think that a huge part of this is the video. To me, is the Glam Slam performance. I think Michael Dean has done an incredible job of talking about how to recontextualize things for him. And same for me. I was like, you know, I think any of us who came up, especially being online in the 90s, like Jughead was the song that you used to mock the work, right? Like it was the punching bag. And to go from that to be like, man, is this that song? Because I'm enjoying this. Like I'm digging this. And I think the biggest surprise to me of this was all the live content and how well, even that this was an era that I was so engaged in. I watched all the music videos and had the VHS, all the Diamonds and Pearls, blah 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 blah, all the things, all the singles. And this album was about, to me, the EPs, the Get Off and Cream singles. I listened to those two 10 times as much as I listened to the album, easily. And then to see this set sort of reintegrate that by bringing the energy and the, you know, inventiveness that I loved. Yes, if we're gonna do it,
we're gonna do it.
What I got right here, and I got this because I knew the set was coming. Let me see if I can get this in focus. This is one of the original 12-inch singles that was sent out. This was Joe Willis's copy, and I decided to raid the kids' college fund, and I had to have it because this is the moment when I heard about it. I remember a little blurb in Rolling Stone saying he sent out these records on his birthday, and it was just the mystery of it, and I think it presaged the entire next decade of his battle with the label about control over his work and distribution, and he's learning that I can hack the system and put stuff out. All that at once, along with like a song that was just, you know, Get Off to start this record, was so powerful and so real, and felt like that's Prince. That's who we know, you know. So I think all that together was there. So this set sort of pushed all those buttons for me, but didn't. It elevated the album in my mind, because to me this was not, for me, not dismissing, this was not one of his great albums. This was like the singles for me, and now this goes into being something that I think about a lot different.
Thanks for that. There's so many comments in the chat. All right, so I have our second question, and let me put it here. When you heard about that Diamonds and Pearls was going to be the next box set, what was your initial reaction? And be honest, now that you've gotten the box set, how has your reception shifted? So we're going to start off with you, Arthur.
So I was happy because I felt that it was justified. There'd been a lot of talk about combining Diamonds and Pearls as well as the Symbol album following in 1992 as one set. And I thought that would be a disservice to both albums. I'm very much in alignment with Anil's comments. I feel that as an album, it's okay. It's not a favorite of mine, um, by a lot of distance. But Diamonds and Pearls, the event of it punched way above its weight, and I believe that it set a core foundation for the rest of his work for a good 15, even 25 years moving forward. Um, I had let me go back to answering your question before I, go left. Um, now that I have the set, as I'd said earlier, went, I've learned a lot from it. I've learned a great deal, contextually from Andrea Swenson's podcast series that she did on behalf of the estate. It's really my favorite series, and I had said, I think to you, D'Angelo, when you were doing 1+1+1 is 3, and I was talking about, oh, listen, Diamonds and Pearls, they're going to show up, that it's very different than just him changing his sound, and you get that on the box set in the vault tracks. He's trying different things, to see what works. I've been through, I think all of us on this panel had been through him changing his sound, drastically changing his sound. We can handle that. This was a little different because, and there was some back and forth about yesterday in the comments, particularly, about this being a comeback for him. I'm in the camp that it was a comeback for him. There was a massive PR campaign for this album. There was a lot of press, particularly in music industry magazines, about Warner giving him, I believe, the highest paid contract. I think there was like a price war between him, and Madonna. Prince, at this point, we're seeing Prince as an institution. And for me, now I'm starting to get into my feelings because I have a lot of feelings over this album. But for me, going from these years of, I think I'm feeling myself. I'm 10 years in the game as a fan. I've been to concerts. I've been through 4 movies. I've talked my way into after shows. I got like legend level stories that I'm feeling. Miko Weaver's sister gives me a tape of the Black Album, soundboard tape of the Black Album. I'm feeling something here, and so navigating this shift to what I feel is so different and away from what I'm not just comfortable with, but what I have established my fandom on. This release was a real challenge for me because I began to start meeting fans who, and a few of them on my college campus, had come up to me. Maybe I had on a Prince shirt or whatever, and engaging me in conversation about how much they loved Prince. But if the conversation got a little deeper and I start talking about me being me, I bring up Dirty Mind, they don't, oh wow, I've never heard that album. What they're really talking about is how much they love Diamonds and Pearls. But it's, like I said, you cut me, I bleed, peach and black or purple or something like that. But you cut them, they bleed yellow. I mean, they are really serious about this. And so I'm reconciling Prince as an institution now who is bringing on a new generation of fans, and their gateway is Arsenio Hall, MTV, the Spin cover, maybe the Rolling Stone 1990 cover story profiling, Graffiti Bridge, moving into this new direction of both music and image that Prince was doing, and I'm starting to reconcile it with this. So that's why I feel that having a Diamonds and Pearls SDE, see, Duff with the flex. So I don't have my stuff, so I'm just gonna. But yes, this is worthy of a separate set. It's worthy of the singles box that they did, similar to what they did for Sign of the Times. You know, all of the accolades that this album is getting is absolutely worth it, because of the importance of this era.
So you're on mute.
Oh, I'm responding to the chat. I'm just like, it's a lot of chat action going on. So let me repeat the question because I've forgotten what the question is. But only because of, no, not because of you, Arthur, but just because like I'm so in the chat right now. So we're gonna go to Zaheer. When you heard that the Diamonds and Pearls was the next Super Deluxe, what was your initial reaction? Now that you've gotten it, how has your reception shifted?
So I was a little bit meh, but I was actually looking forward to it because when Diamonds and Pearls came out, I was in college, and we did not have cable at our school. Our televisions were using rabbit ears, and so I missed the Arsenio Hall show. I missed the Special Olympics in real time. The weekend that the MTV Awards happened, I was actually moving in, so I had like videotaped it that night because I had to like get up in the morning to move to get to campus. And I remember watching it as we were unpacking it, and my folks and I were like, "Wait, what? What just happened?" So I needed to. I was looking forward to this idea of like catching up with this album. The one thing I would say, and I think adding to what everyone's saying about revisiting the significance of this project, I think it's not a small note that the artifact of Prince that is in the Smithsonian Museum of American History, not the Museum of African American History, because they just have a tambourine, which all of us could have bought at a concert. But at the Museum of American History is the yellow cloud guitar, right? It's not the white cloud. It's not a Purple Rain artifact. It's not a Sign of the Times artifact. It's not a parade artifact. It's the yellow cloud guitar. And I do think that says something. It says something about when Prince was being received as a cultural, like as a beyond a pop star, right? Like as someone whose work now belongs in our national archives. And I think that is in part, due to what everyone has said about the machinery that was around Diamonds and Pearls. So I was looking forward to discovering it and realizing that there are so many songs on that album that I like, and especially the songs that feature Michael Bland's drumming prominently. I think just in general, New Jack Swing, it's hit or miss with how it is aged. I think Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis's engagement with New Jack Swing and with Rhythm Nation still kind of holds up for me. Certainly Teddy Riley's production for Michael Jackson's Dangerous is probably one of the best New Jack Swing records of all time, and those hold up. But I think for Prince, what really helps me hold on to, and it gives the kind of timelessness to those songs that I really like, are the ones where Michael's drumming are most prominent. And the other thing that I'll say, and I see that someone just mentioned Spike Lee. This is when we see this, Prince being very unapologetic about his politics. I think most explicit, in a while, through his partnership with Spike Lee. Spike Lee directs the video for Money Don't Matter Tonight in exchange for Prince helping Spike finish Malcolm X. And I think that association, that proximity, and certainly Prince's deeper engagement with Malcolm. And according to Prince's cousin, they had Malcolm posters up on their wall when they were younger. So Malcolm was not new to Prince. And he could not have been new to Prince growing up and spending time in the Way, which is name checked on one of these songs in the vault. And I was like, I couldn't even remember which of the songs. I can't remember, but somebody I'm sure has the lyrics But this is for me, I think, Prince coming really to demonstrate that Minneapolis was always more than a sound. It was a place, it was a community, it was a history, it was a tradition, it was a network of relationships. And though that Minneapolis is really front and center for this project.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that you sort of key on there that are really powerful. I do think this was in broader pop culture an unusually and extraordinarily kind of Afrocentric moment. I mean, you have Malcolm X film that there was so much build up to when it comes out. You have Spike Lee on the record, and you have hip hop changing and evolving into sort of the silver era. I think a lot of that's the context for this record. I mean, as much as has been made, I think there's so much narrative about Prince reacting to hip hop and what's he going to do and blah blah blah. But I think it's the broader cultural sense of like how do you fit in and what kind of what lane are you in. And I think he's rang with that in a really interesting way. So to see this set come out, I was curious how the estate, which obviously is going through a lot, would engage with that. I was curious to see the fandom kind of embracing a different era, right? Like I think there's been, every time any of the other sets come out, it was like, all right, let's get over the 80s now, right? It's like, all right, we're just barely tiptoeing into the 90s. How do y'all feel about this? I think there's also this ambiguity too, where like, because the narrative was about how do you react to the changes in pop culture or this being a comeback. And the thing is like about the comeback thing, like I think that the counter narrative is, well, he always had his fan base and there are people that all supported him and that's all there. And that's always true. And he was somebody who at this stage of his career unambiguously wanted to be a big star, right? You don't do Batman if you're doing, if you're not trying to do that. So like the fact that he wasn't in that place, he's like, let me go fix that, right? Like, doesn't mean he compromised on the art. That doesn't mean, anything other than being fully Prince. But I think there's no ambiguity whatsoever where you're like, if you're like, let me take over the Arsenio Hall show for the entire episode, you're trying to be back in that place. And so I think like seeing fans have a new, context for reckoning with that. And also how much of the conversation is about the music now, because very little of the conversation at the time when Diamonds Are Pearls came out that I remember contextually, and I remember it well, was about the composition of the music, right? Who's in the band and what genres is he doing and how does it relate to his career? How does it relate to the other artists? I know in the chat we're talking about this is the like biggest contract ever battles. Yeah, Madonna was in the mix as art side, but Janet was the most recent before that. And I had done a podcast years ago and interviewed, a number of folks who were involved, with Prince's engagement in tech in that era. And one of the things that I remember coming out of that conversation was like, he was proud of being a vice president at Warner Brothers. It's such a weird thing to say, but they were like, no, he was into it. Like that was like, he liked having the office and the title which is a very different version of him than I think a lot of us picture, right? Because he's, it's like 2 years later, he's like, I'm going to stick it to the man. I'm going to change my name and, and all these kinds of things. But I think to get to that level of feeling betrayed or violated, you had to have been pretty bought in at one point. And this is the beginning of the era. He starts the beginning of this era where he is bought in. He is like, we're going to have these hits together and I'm going to go play. I've been on that lot. Like it's not the coolest place in the world to play a show, like to take the band and go and play at Warner Brothers lot and do it. He's really, really bought in. So I think that contrast to be able to bring to this, like this collection is about that as much as it's about the music and the vault tracks and all the things that we always think these things are. So I think that's really my, my lens on like, I'm glad this set was done. I'm curious to see the reaction. I intrinsically, it's not as big a deal to the outside world, like the non-fan world, as the records that everybody knows, that are the sort of go-tos or that even though like you think of like the kids that have like their My First Vinyl collection and they'll put Purple Rain in it, right? Because that's one of the ones you're supposed to have if you buy a record player. This ain't in that list, like that's okay. That's okay. But I think that's sort of the difference is like this is for folks who are like engaging with Prince's career and his constellation of people he worked with and people that, were in Minneapolis and all the other things we said, as opposed to I'm a music fan, I'm supposed to have this record, which some of the other sets might have fallen into. Because if you make your top 50 list, you're going to put Purple Rain on there. You're going to put Sign of the Times on there. And this is one where like, I don't think you would put top 50 pop albums of all time or, whatever. You wouldn't put this on there. And so I think this goes into a different place. So that's all to say, I think this stuff was taking the work seriously. And I think, I do take the point where like, I know there's some disagreement with like Prince being bought in. I only say that like he did sign the deal that he later objected to. That part is unambiguous. And I think there was a part of that involves having to believe in the institution and the industry to a certain degree. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that happens. And there's like everybody's been there where you're willing to believe for a little bit until you see, what they're really about. But he's at the beginning of that journey. Like I think he's never fully bought in. Like he never sold out to the industry, obviously. But the most bought in Prince got to the industry is at the beginning of this era. I think that is the point when he is sort of most willing to reckon of like, well, if all my peers, the closest I have to peers, can do this, then maybe I'll do it too. And so I think seeing that as the thing that he's going through, because I loved on the Glam Slam show, they have Sacrifice of Victor in there already, fully formed. That is just a jaw-dropping performance. I always love that song, and now I'm like another level. And the most nakedly autobiographical song that arguably he ever did, but certainly to that point he had ever done. And I think that's what catalyzes the reckoning, right? Why does he reconnect to who he is and his community and what he's about and his principles and all these kinds of things? Is like he's willing to go on and talk about, whether it's Bernadette Anderson or The Way or whatever it is. So I think that's a real, a profound pivot. And then the other thing I'll add, I know there are more artifacts in the National Museum of African American History that they don't have on display. So I hope they do broaden out past the tambourine, because I think we all think that's a little bit casual. But that's the thing too, is like there's so much more. The reason we can criticize like the casualness or the superficiality of the tambourine is because we know he had that additional depth. But I think this was the era where it had both. There was the like, I'm going to merchandise this guitar to the point where it becomes iconic for me. Like there are more visuals of him with the yellow guitar than the white cloud guitar, even though the narrative starts with the white cloud guitar and in Purple Rain. So he's doing this sort of thing of visibility and distinctiveness. And he has a complete immersion in his lore. We can all recite Chiquita Yellow and the Typhoon Hair and the Barbarella and the Godfather 3 and Gangsta Glam and there's a whole dialogue of phrases that are unique to him, very insular to his crew, not even other Minneapolis artists, like just him and his people. And he starts to build his lore in that way, in a way that I think becomes part of his persona even more than in the 80s when he's talking about, I'm going to go looking for the ladder. So I think it's really, I think it's just a story of the moment. I also love that there is that much, there could be that much pushback or disagreement on this stuff, because this is the point where he has that reckoning, where people are going to say, like, he goes, which path does he go on and how much do you see? But I think there's a part that's inarguable. This is where he plants the seeds for the decade to come, where everything changes.
Ooh, I don't even know how to follow up with this. So I'll say this. When I heard that there was going to be a Super Deluxe, I was super excited. I was over the moon, which I might be the only one here who was super excited. And it has a lot to do about, I think, what this album means to me in a generational sense. And I guess that's going to be my angle to actually answer that question, is really about thinking about generations and thinking about cross-generational, intergenerational, whichever term that you want to use. I've talked about this before, I think, is that Batman was the first Prince album that I had. And while Arthur, you were saying that you see Batman as being separate from here, I actually, in my mind, in terms of generations, they make sense. And what I mean by that is because Batman is I'm going to say a superhero, even though I know there are debates about whether or not Batman is a superhero. I'm not going to get into those debates, right? I'm just going to say he's a superhero just for the sake of the argument. We're not going to get into that, whether or not he is. But it's more about Superman as a kind of cross-generational figure that for me, as someone who read comics, but also who watched a lot of reruns, Batman, I was already heavily invested in this Tim Burton formation of Batman and whatever kind of album is going to be attached to this, which helped establish a connection between me and my parents through music, was through a little bit through Batman. And when I say a little bit, and this is also the connection to Diamonds and Pearls, is like I can kind of get away with that with Bat Dance a little bit, right? Because if you're not paying attention, it's fine. But obviously when you get to other songs on the album, Scandalous, or sort of Electric Chair, what have you, a different kind of lyrical representation that my parents would not be okay with, but yet and still Batman gave me a cover to listen to Prince in a way that for my parents seemed safe, but for me not so safe, right? Because I, even though I didn't know or recognize all the things that were happening, I knew that there was something happening that I should not be listening to this, but I am anyway. And there's a similar kind of connection with Diamonds and Pearls. And the connection is that when Diamonds and Pearls comes out, when that single drops, that becomes another connection between me and my parents, because my mom loved that song. My mom thought she was Rosie Gaines as we are going to school together. Like that was a song that I would sing with her. I know it's whatever, it's gonna sound however it's gonna sound, right? But me channeling Prince and my mom being Rosie, and there was a kind of interesting moment in that. And my mom loved that song not only because she thought it was a beautiful song, but also my mom is an AKA, so like Pearls was a thing for her, Diamonds a thing for her, right? And so getting licensed then to get Diamonds and Pearls as an album, the single gave me a cover, right? My parents were like, oh, this is, even though they knew who Prince was, I don't know why my parents still let me listen to that album, whatever, it is what it is, but they were just like, okay, sure, Diamonds and Pearls, this really nice pop, radio-friendly single. And for me, it's like, oh, and now we have Cream, and now we have Get Off, and now we have all these other kinds of songs. And so much like Batman gave me a particular kind of cover to get more invested in the kind of Prince that I now really appreciate, Diamonds and Pearls did that same kind of thing, but it also gave me the connections between me and my parents, right? That there was some sort of generational thing that was happening as well in terms of how my parents read both of those albums and therefore how I consume both of those albums. And so when we talk about Diamonds and Pearls being a generational shift, that for those of us who didn't necessarily have access to the 80s iteration of Prince, Diamonds and Pearls gives us a new sort of license, right? And so Diamonds and Pearls becomes another opening for me. I think I had a brief window of something, a hint of something with Batman. Diamonds and Pearls is a full-on kind of opening into Prince for me that means so much. I will say, that doesn't mean that Diamonds and Pearls is ranked high on my list of all-time Prince albums, because it's not. And yet I hold a soft spot for this album. And so to know that it was going to get a super deluxe treatment, I was, again, over the moon about what else could be happening at this moment that I wasn't aware of at that time in 91. That I can now kind of be a part of, right? What kind of moment, what kind of era can I participate in that I wasn't actually participating in back in 91? And so things like sort of the Glam Slam video, those things, incredible, obviously. And I got to tap into that, right? Because I didn't have access to that. And the last thing that I'll say in terms of generation is that I'm really curious about how my students are going to respond if they so choose to write about diamonds and pearls. So their final is due next week. One part of their final is to compare a 90s or 2000s Prince album to an 80s Prince album that we listened to in class. And so I'm really curious to see those students who might pick up on diamonds and pearls. One student has already finished their final and wrote about rainbow children, which I think is interesting. But that's not for the topic of conversation. But I am interested in those who choose diamonds and pearls and how they actually respond to it as well. We did listen to Cream as a way to kind of end the class. For whatever reason, I decided to play Cream, and they really, really enjoyed it. And only 3 students had heard it before. And so for those students who choose diamonds and pearls, I'm curious if it's going to be another kind of sort of generational moment for them as well. And to answer the question, yes, it was Rainbow Children and Love Sexy.
Thank you so much for that, Elliott. So a couple of things I want to say. First of all, I'm super excited, but it looks like I'm going to be teaching my first Prince course in the spring of 2025 at NYU. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm going to be calling on 2 people on this screen to give me some feedback and hints about how to handle it. But I wanted to respond to something that you said, Elliott, and I already sort of said this in the previous roundtable, but sometimes people don't watch everything, and I think it's really important in the context of this question to say this. When up until 1 + 1 + 1 is 3, and up until that point when you told me we need to celebrate diamonds and pearls, I was in get off land. I mean, for 30 years, I was in get off land. And like I said in the previous roundtable, preparing for
Same here.
Thanks, Anil. Preparing for a symposium, I always play the albums on repeat. But actually, another thing happened. When Prince passed, I saw a performance by Alice Smith, who is one of my favorite female vocalists. I love her. And she actually did a performance of Diamonds and Pearls right after Prince passed. That's actually the first thing that changed my mind about Diamonds and Pearls, because in that moment, I realized that the song, not the album, but the song was a bona fide standard. I mean, it should really become a pop standard. It is crafted so well. It is actually, in my personal opinion, one of Prince's best written songs in terms of the lyrics and also the arrangement as well. But you know how I am about lyrics, because it had just taken me like almost 30 years to figure out what was he singing about. So when you made me include Diamonds and Pearls in the symposium and I had started playing it on repeat, I realized, oh my God, this album is brilliant. It really is brilliant. But I think the part of the problem for me is that it's a little schizo, and it goes back to a combination of analog, Michael B, real drums, and then you have the New Jack Swing, and that's it. It's very, very schizo in that regard, because you have strolling and then listening to some of these songs, and we're not going to probably get to this question, so I'm going to say this: Dark Side is the song. Everybody's talking about blood in the sheets, but Dark Side is the song. I just got to say that really quickly, because I probably won't have an opportunity to do that. So I just wanted to thank you, Elliott. So I was actually excited for this spot, not because I was in it. I'm telling because I'm a Prince fan. First of all, I'm always excited about a Super Deluxe edition, but because of you, Elliott, I give you so much thanks. I was like, yeah, Diamonds and Pearls deserves a box set. But not only that, what Anil touched on, and also because, Diamonds and Pearls and the Love Symbols, those 2 eras, there was so much going on. He was doing so much promotion. There's so much that you can pull from, that I was actually elated that they were doing Diamonds and Pearls. If Miles were here, because he texted me a couple times and he was like, So are you happy with, writing an essay for Diamonds and Pearls? I was like, of course I am. I mean, I would be elated to write an article about, let me see, what can I choose? About planet Earth. And I'm not a big fan about planet Earth. That's just not my album. But if somebody asks me if I want to write something that's going to go into a Prince box set, I'm going to say yes. But in fact, I was actually ecstatic to write about Diamonds and Pearls because of you, Elliott. So I just want to make sure that you get that credit. And I think that's also another important reason why we're doing these symposia. And it's all of us, it's not me, to reevaluate these albums. And you guys put Prince in so much context so that it also gives life to some of the songs that we've all dismissed, like Jughead, for instance. Like you said, Zaheer, like seeing him perform Jughead live, I really wish that Glam Slam show would have came out in real time. I think there would be a totally different discourse in real time moving forward about Diamonds and Pearls if that would have gotten released. I really, really do.
I'll tag in one thing on that because I thought the same
Yeah.
thing, and I realized this goes to the heart of him, like being like, I want to be able to release more material, because they did put out a VHS of the Diamonds and Pearls era, but it's just the videos, and he couldn't do a live show, and he knew he had it. Like that goes to, I think, where the battle starts from that point.
Yeah. So let's go to the next question, which is, here we go. Who do you think the Super Deluxe Edition's audience is? And do you think this current strategy works? Why or why not? And we're going to start off with Arthur.
Kind of a tough question, because I believe inherently that the box sets themselves are geared toward that audience that grew up with that music, Gen Xers, early millennials, given the price point, if nothing else. Case in point, with all of the talk that's been and all the accolades, and rightfully so, that have been laid upon the Glam Slam video, there will not, and I don't think ever will be, a separate release for that. I'd be surprised, because that is the hook for you to get, that's basically the justifier for the price point. The vault tracks themselves don't have the legacy of vault tracks from earlier sets, particularly the Sign of the Time sets. So that by itself was, the hook for something like that. But going back to what I believe the Diamonds and Pearls era punching above its weight, I do feel that in your informal poll kind of spoke to this at the beginning of the day about who bought what set, and more people bought the CD set because the price point was easier to swallow. Maybe some people don't have record players, Now me, I don't have a record player, but I got 2 sealed up copies of box sets that together, cost me about $625 or something like that, because that's just what I'm into. That's me, that's where I live, so to speak. And I think that Diamonds and Pearls stratifies more people in terms of where they live. Excuse me. Adults of a certain age, like me, live in the Diamonds and Pearls era. But then there are other people, I spoke about this before, this new generation of fans, but also a new generation period that have been introduced to this music. And when they were young, 6, 7, 8, 9, they heard Cream, they heard Get Off, they heard Diamonds and Pearls. They sang along with their parents driving them to school, things like that, So I think this is the release that stratifies more people based on their own personal experiences with the music, as opposed to younger aged folks, or even newer, quote unquote, newer fans, because we're talking about a release that's 30 some odd years old, have also experienced themselves instead of just hearing about it. It doesn't feel old to them. Like 1999 may feel old to some people because they weren't alive at the time, and many people weren't alive or able to go to the Purple Rain show because of their age. So.
Oh, I guess I'm next.
Yes.
Yeah, when you're a big, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I was just like, oh, I'm looking at the chat.
Sorry.
So it's okay. I mean, I think so. Here's how I understand, like how in my head, like for people who are used to publishing and scholarship, there's like a university press and there's like a trade press. And if you go with an academic press, it's like very specialized. Those books tend to be hell of expensive relative to what you would find in a trade publication. But there's a little bit more, like they've been vetted, they've been reviewed, peer reviewed, and the expectation is that maybe some people will assign these books in their classes. And these are references, like reference text. That's how I see the special deluxe edition just generally, is like this is a scholarly enterprise. I mean, in my like frame of reference. And the reason why I'm saying that is how I engage it. Is this is a document, this is an archive, this is something to be studied. I still have not finished listening to the set in the way that I need to listen to it. There will be things I will not really listen to again, but will come back to at some future point in time. So that's how I see it. I think, there are controlled budgets for promoting these kinds of issues, reissues, and I think it's very much geared towards fans, older people who are in the time of their lives where they have the money to devote to collecting things, and spending money in a little bit more premium type of things. And also, I think that there is a revival of vinyl. And so eventually I think that will get to younger collectors. But I think this is very much not something that is designed to be widespread. That said, I do think that the estate has, done a fair job with the resources that it has, to put stuff online and make it available and streaming so that people can encounter it. But that's how I would think about that. I don't bemoan that, right? I know that this needs to be successful to a degree to make other future projects viable, and I think that's really important. I also there's a kind of intimacy that I think many of us have enjoyed with our relationship to Prince and his music, that is often challenged with super popular mainstream exposure. That part of how our sense of community is defined, and again, I'm not saying this that I want to limit the exposure Prince has, but part, I think, of what has defined our community is that we are seekers. We are people who have gone beyond what has been delivered to people. We have gone beyond what has been marketed, and found something. And that seeker is really what I love in all of you and the people that gather for these symposia and and conferences and whatnot. There's something about the curiosity that people have, that I trust something about you, and know that even if we disagree on what the final compilation should look like or sequence should look like and why it doesn't have this or does have that, the fact that we are making that extra step, I think, is something that I have always valued about the Prince community. And I say that not like embracing gatekeeping or cliquishness, but Prince has always been, I'm like one of my best friends who just, was not into Prince the way I was. And one day we had a conversation and they said, because Prince requires you to enter into a world to get it. And I'm just not trying to make that journey. And I was like, fair enough. And so I think these kinds of releases are for the people who want to enter into that world.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I love the analogy of the university press versus the trade press, and I think, I mean, this gets into sort of, I'm not an academic, right? And I'm the Billy Sparks. Like, this is still a business, right? And where I come in with it is all estates dealing with archival releases and posthumous releases have an impossible problem, right? And in Prince's case, it's particularly acute because, one, he has far more of the what would Prince do as a constraint than many other artists do, right? Because, like, I mean, if Michael Jackson's estate, to pick a name, did a hologram on stage of him, fans would be like, whatever. I think they did do it because he did do everything. Like, he was unapologetic about that thing. But Prince was both very, very precise in how he wanted to be portrayed and changed his mind all the time. Right. So, like, that's a really tough thing to navigate as a business constraint because uh, whether casual or fully engaged fans like us, you have to believe this is in keeping with his ethos and his artistry. And he was so much more adamant about how he portrayed his artistry than 99% of pop artists ever are. Right. So, like, that is a really hard constraint. I think that's part one is of what's really, really hard. Part two is there's so much material. It is arguably the biggest archive of material of any major pop artist ever, probably by a lot. Right. So the problem is way harder. It's way harder where you're like, like I said, you could take 10 songs off of this and be like, that should be an originals. And it would be a reasonable, logical choice, even within the framework they've set up of essentially SDEs, originals, and then with Welcome to America, new releases, right, or sort of complete unreleased records. So those are the three structures that they picked. As a strategy, I like that a lot. I think if I put on my like hard-hearted business hat or whatever, and I'm like, if I didn't know this artist, and I didn't love this artist, I didn't care about it. The number one challenge for the Prince estate is relevance. Number one, how do you make more people? And this, you talk about this a lot. This is why you do it, is keep his name on people's lips and his voice in people's ears. And he was willing to trade his immediate relevance for his long-term relevance for much of his career. This is why he wasn't on streaming services. This is why he made a deliberate level of inaccessibility. You have to know the lore and you have to know the context and you have to put your credit card in some random website to get the record. And, like, there was all kinds of things where he put up barriers in service of his point of view about artistry and ownership and equity and all the other things. So compared to what do you want? We got it. Whatever format, like, we're going to come to you and we're going to put it up on the silver platter and it's going to be out there in your face and re-released 15 times because we only got 10 songs anyway, like a lot of other estates. It's a very, very different challenge. And then, of course, you deal with the normal stuff that I think we all know of. There's a lot of chaos and disorder in the sort of business side and the ownership and leadership that's there. So I think that's a really, really hard problem. I think given that reality, the objective view I have of it, separate from my own feelings, is they've done an extraordinary job. There's not one release that's been embarrassing. There's not one release where you're like, that's fundamentally broken, you didn't get it. There's not one release. Like, I can quibble with, like, I think, for example, the criticisms about the breadth and inclusion of voices in talking about the material at various releases, I think has been right. And I think it's been really well regarded. But I don't think you can point to voices that have been included and be like, that person's not credible. It's just like, what were credible voices that were not included, which is a very different thing than, again, a lot of archival releases. The other thing I'd say is, like, I've said this before at Symposia, the state of the standard for archival releases, especially for Black artists, is abysmal. It's horrendous. Like, people do not respect the work as it deserves to be. And that's not true with this. I look at the quality of the work and I think, like, that's there. Even the, like, people talk about sound quality. Like there are entire estates where the only thing they have is cassette tapes. And so, to be like, oh, it's not from the original masters or whatever, like I think that's a little bit sort of splitting hairs. So all that to say, it's a really hard task. I think I feel blessed we got any of it. I think there was a real point where it could have gone the other way and we'd be like waiting 10 years for one record. And to have a consistent, almost annual production of both a deluxe edition and a sort of newish release or an unreleased thing. I think that cadence, if they can keep that up, would be extraordinary. On the other hand, one of the big challenges for relevance is there's not that much more material the casual fans are interested in. Right? Let's be real. There's like 2 more albums you can get a casual fan to think about. Like, I know that song maybe. And the path to relevance involves doing stuff that I don't think is going to meet any of our tastes if they want to go for a younger audience. Like, putting music in commercials, putting music in movies, pushing for people to do TikTok dances, all that kind of stuff. I think that stuff is really, I think would put off a lot of people here. And if the estate chose to do it, I would think it was probably a good call. Like with my, not my dispassionate hat on, I would say that's probably what it takes to still be going. And I look at, I got a 12-year-old kid. He knows, 2 Fleetwood Mac songs. He knows Kate Bush, Running Up That Hill. He knows, and Kate Bush was not a hit when she was a hit in the US. I love her. She's a genius. And she was never big, right? And so for her to be big now because of Netflix, get some Prince songs on Netflix. You know what I mean? Like go do the work. Like that's, Book of Clarence, that I see that Zaheer in the comments. That's a good example. Like putting it in the trailer. I think the Taika Waititi show, the Pirate Show, I can't remember the name of. They had a Prince song in one of the trailers. Like that's what it looks like, and that's a really, I'm tough. Like I feel it's tough for me to say that because it's not my aesthetic. I'm not the audience, but I want that to happen because I want this music to persist, and I want people to. Because I do think people get pulled in. I think when they hear one thing that like twists their brain from Prince, they're like, "Who is this dude? Let me see more." How many of y'all have seen in the comments on, like I said, somebody on YouTube watching the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that solo or the Super Bowl, performance, and they see that and they're like, "Whoa, this dude, this is this guy. This is nothing like," because the only breath they've heard him in is on some mixed playlist alongside Duran Duran. You know what I mean? Like they haven't seen what this person is. So all that to say, it's an impossible job. I'm grateful for what they do. I'm fiercely critical. I mean, I do a million things different, including on this set. On the other hand, it's there. It's good. I can point at it. We can have a conversation about it. And the conversation we're not having is, we don't have to have a conversation that is like, they left a song off the record and, or like, and I mean, like, it sounds embarrassing, but like that stuff happens, right? Is it gets put out by people that don't know and don't care. And I look at, like just to pick a name, like I look at Dwayne Tudall, like that guy cares. That does a lot of work. That does a lot of work. Everybody, I mean, to know to put, D'Angelo on in the notes, that's somebody caring. That is the most credible voice you could have. Man, that is not happening for a lot of archival stuff. So I'm ranting, but like that part, I'm just like, I'm grateful for it because it could have been so much worse. And I say this with all the love in my heart. It's not like he was good at this shit himself. We got more half-assed. I saw y'all talking about Crystal Ball, like showed up late, some kids packing t-shirts around it to make sure it doesn't get broken in the mail. Like there's, that stuff is hard. Logistics is hard. So next year, I hope they go nuts to a degree where all of us who are, serious fans are annoyed as hell. Why are they just pushing this? He has other records. I don't give a shit. How many people got into the deep stuff because of Purple Rain? Millions of people. So I hope they go all out. I hope they trot out the revolution. I hope they do whatever, because that opens the door to people finding more depth. Anyway, I'm ranting. Sorry.
It's so It's okay, Anil. I really appreciate everything that you had to say. And Elliott, before you begin, I do think it's really important to do all those things that you're saying in order to engage the younger audiences. And like you said, I know some of us, would just like cringe, hearing a Prince song in a commercial and all that. But it's really important that Prince's music persists and live on. And I think that it will. But it, like going back to just like, I'm kind of amazed at how few covers there are of certain Prince songs because, again, Diamonds and Pearls, the song, I think is just like a bona fide pop standard classic. I think it could be covered by so many vocalists and, like even sometimes it snows in April. I mean, we could go on and list all the songs. So I hope that the estate, I call it the Prince Estate. I think the correct term is Paisley Park Enterprises because that's what Kanisa said, and Kanisa knows what's going on. So I hope that Paisley Park Enterprises really tries to figure out how to engage the youth. I think is so important. All right, Elliott, take it away.
I mean, I'll pick up where you just left off, and that's next year is going to be really interesting to see what they do with Purple Rain, because I think one of the and I'm going to answer the question, but I first want to talk about this because it's fresh in my mind. But trying to figure out what's actually going to be done next year, because I think that is a particular opportunity to have a generation, multiple generations of artists on podcasts, on TV shows, on award shows, really flooding the market with so many different kinds of artists who can speak to different sets of generations, who can talk about the importance of Purple Rain and can talk about the importance of Prince through Purple Rain, right? And I think that becomes a particular kind of link that, especially about sort of younger artists, is because I'll make a particular plug in my class. But one of the things that I do sometimes is I will bring up newer, quote, not new in the sense of like they've only been around for a couple of years, but newer in the sense of my students will know who this person is. And so like when I'm talking about Vanity 6, I'll bring up when Beyonce does Nasty Girl in concert, right? So I'll pull up those videos. When I'm talking about The Time, I'll bring up the Grammy performance that, Rihanna did with, The Time. So that for me is a way to kind of show like, here's this person who you definitely know. And here is how they're engaging with Prince's music and Prince's artistry. I'll talk about Beyonce performing with Prince. I'll do that too. But like, with something like Vanity, in terms of Vanity 6 and The Time, who my students probably don't really know, right, for a number of reasons, I can take examples of Beyonce and Rihanna as a way to show relevance, as a way to show a kind of genealogy of sound through sort of Black popular music that I hope that my students can actually attach to. And so this is to say that I think when it comes to something like next year in Purple Rain, there are opportunities to make those kinds of connections for folks, to talk about the album, to talk about the movie, to talk about so much involving that era, that I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. And so I think that's one particular way that Paisley Park sort of enterprises can sort of tap into that. When it comes to the Diamonds and Pearls Super Deluxe, I think, this is just going to echo what I think everyone else has said. Because I think of the price point, you're going to get mostly Prince fam buying this, but that's not necessarily, it's for me, and I know I'm not going to disagree with you, sort of, Neil, about this, but part of why I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing, in part because it gives us more material to talk to each other about. For me, when these re-releases come out, and they come out with some, sort of frequency, I feel like that actually strengthens us as a community, as a kind of fandom, because it gives us more opportunities to talk with each other, to be with one another. That I think is really powerful. And that is something that I really, really appreciate, because, we don't necessarily have these kind of online forums in the same way. And so these albums allow us, they actually bring us together, right? To use a kind of sort of cliche that a lot of musicologists, myself included, hate, the kind of notion around sort of music brings people together. But I'm going to use that in this case because I think it's true, right? That actually does happen. And so I think I fundamentally appreciate this fact that these albums are coming out, these super deluxes are coming out with relative frequency that always give us an occasion to be together. It also gives someone like D'Angela, again, just lauding you and applauding you, because we can continue to have these sets of forms, have these sets of spaces that are crossing generations to talk about Prince and to talk about the importance of Prince and to think through Prince and to bring Prince further into our lives. And I'm always going to love that. I'm always going to appreciate that. Because it gives us, again, occasion to be with one another. It becomes almost like holiday time all the time, right? This is what it feels like, right? That we do have our own Prince fam. And so it is a kind of familial kinship gathering that takes place because of these frequent kind of releases. And so I see a kind of social importance of this. I know that if it's really insular, it's not best for the economic bottom line. I get that. I'm not going to poo-poo on that. But I do think that there is a lot of importance in how it strengthens us, as fam, to kind of talk and be with one another. So that is what I wanted to say there. And then I think, the other kind of, I think audience obviously is for folks who become sort of nostalgic for the Diamonds and Pearls era, right? That's another kind of thing. And I think you're right, Anil, that like there are only a couple of more shots at getting that particular target audience. And so what now I think perhaps needs to happen is having these celebratory events around certain albums, but and I will say this, I think so Andrea Swinson's podcast was fantastic at doing this celebration of these kinds of events, and yet at the same time not talking about them as their singular things, right? And what I mean by that is you talk about the Diamonds and Pearls album, but you also sort of give a window into the fact that this is part of a larger kind of sort of trajectory for Prince. It's a larger kind of thing that that really only gets better from here. And I think that's going to be the thing that's really going to be incumbent for Paisley Park Enterprises, is having these super deluxes. Yes, they are these singular things, but how do we not treat them as singular moments? That's going to be, I think, the real key here to ensure that folks are still going to buy this, because yes, right, you can do one on musicology, right? But to also put it in conversation with these other sets of things happening is going to be really key. And so I think that's the kind of sort of thought process that I have right now about that. I lost my other point, and I know we're also winding down on time, so I'll just wrap up.
I really appreciate everything that you said, Elliott, and there's so much. And I mean, there's so much about. I'm trying to listen to you. I'm trying to read the comments in the chat. I'm trying to put the chats on, and it's can be a little overwhelming at times. But I do love that you pointed out that the reason why it was very important for me to do this at least a month out was that I find that even with the super deluxe editions, even though is so much material, that people just don't spend the time with them. I like, we get them, and then after a week, no one's talking about it. Obviously, whatever that word is, I'm making it bigger than it. That's not really what. Thank you, exaggerating. I appreciate that, Anil. And so I think it's important that we continue to talk about it. Now, one of the things I would love to do, and I can't do it because I'm doing What Did Prince Do this week? The last time we did this for Sign of Time Super Deluxe, I don't know if you guys remember, we actually did 5 additional sessions after the celebration, going through every single album. We did Vault 1, Vault 2, Vault 3, every single weekend, because it was just so much material to cover. And I would love to do that this time as well. And the reason why I wanted to do it back then is to continue the conversation about that body of work, that was included in these box sets, the vault tracks in particular. So all the points that you made, Elliott, are extremely important in terms of, we have to extend the life of these super deluxe editions. And I try to do that in my very small way with these celebrations. That's one thing. The other thing that you said that I think is really important and powerful, and something I think about a lot, is the social elements. And one of the reasons why I do continue to do these when it gets more and more difficult to do them every year, because it does get, I do get really tired, because to be honest, I'm still kind of tired from April, from the Triple Threat Symposium, because it takes a lot out of me. And I'm not being funny, I'm being very real, because work has been pretty hectic and I refuse to let my Prince work go. So I have to make a lot of sacrifices. My husband has to make a lot of sacrifices. My family has to make a lot of sacrifices. Like, I miss people's birthday parties because they know, I'm talking about my family, my core family, because I'm doing Prince stuff. But I think it's important to continue to gather and fellowship in these spaces, because loneliness right now is a pandemic. I mean, because of the pandemic, more and more people are dealing with loneliness and depression. And I also think just because of technology, there's a loss of connection. And I've always thought that music brings people together. I wouldn't have friends if it wasn't for music, to be honest. All my friends are Prince friends. And I do think that we should continue to be human and to have these gatherings and this fellowship. So I personally think these events are really important. Obviously for Prince it's really important, but for us, to be in communion with one another, because we're all so very busy. And for you guys to take time out of your lives and from your families to be here for 2 whole days in Arthur's case, it's a huge sacrifice and a huge deal. So I know I see certain comments in the chat from people. I think someone said, "Oh, she's going to cry again," or something like this. I mean, it's serious business. I mean, I'm sorry if you don't understand how powerful music is, but I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this to get a name or whatever. I'm doing this for music. So I think that's really important. So the next Power Generation had an incredible moderator. Her name was Miss India. And she had the most incredible last question that I'm going to steal, because I thought it was just absolutely brilliant. So I'm going to ask this last question from Miss India. What question would you ask Prince about or tell Prince as it relates to the Diamonds and Pearls Super Deluxe Edition or Diamonds and Pearls era in general? Isn't that a brilliant question? And Arthur, are you ready?
Yeah. Yeah. Why rap? So I'm so glad you asked this question, because I was gonna, whatever your last question was gonna be, I was gonna bring rap into it. And to be clear, Diamonds and Pearls, it's not Prince's rap album or the Symbol album, for that matter. there have been many cases over the years where he's integrated rap into his live performances, either himself directly or one of the band members. There have been many cases on previous albums going back as far as 1999 where he's integrated rap to it. So that isn't really a big deal for me. The reason why so first of all, on Diamonds and Pearls, Willing and Able has always been my favorite song off of the album. And over the years, from time to time, I would either stop the song at the last bridge that Rosie sings going into Tony M's rap, or I'll just power through it. Some years ago, I got, Diamonds and Pearls beginnings before the rap was added, and I listened to that. But something's missing from that song that the finished version adds that makes it much better, for me. The issue of rap in Prince's albums for me never extended to Tony M personally. It never even got that far for me. I mean, for example, if you parachuted in Cool G Rap, for example, to do rap for Prince, it wouldn't solve the problem for me. I'd always felt like, and remember earlier I was getting into, hey, now I'm meeting, new fans, and this era of Prince, this is a complete wipe the Etch-a-Sketch, and let's start, with a fresh page. It felt like the first time that Prince was actually chasing a trend as opposed to establishing the trend. And that bothered me because in hip hop, there were many things. And love for Tony M, because I'm looking at Anil's comment, and this is true. What Tony M was able to do, particularly on that song, and he talks about it on the podcast, and this is one of the reasons I love the episode where Tony M is talking about this, because he even himself has some trepidation about integrating rap into the concerts, into the music. But what he had to do with the cadence to match what Prince was doing musically on Willing and Able, and I always felt that Tony M's voice, it always reminded me of Chill Rob G, who is an MC in his own right, worked with DJ Mark, the 45 King. Many people would know him from a reworking of his song that was done by a group called Snap, called The Power. That's Cool Rob G it's the same song, kind of like rebranded. But anyway, it never got as far as Tony M. It got as far as following a trend instead of defining one. And hip hop really respected Prince over the years. His beat making, his style, his aesthetic. Some rappers mirrored that aesthetic. World Class Wrecking Crew, Dr. Dre, all the groups, they have the look, they have the Purple Rain influenced look. Prince was always an element in these forms of music. And of course, there were his remarks, Prince's remarks in Dead On It. But in 1991, more people had heard about the Black Album than had actually listened to it. The Black Album was really still a premium traded product. And it was really a bootleg product, because to get the Black Album, you got to dig in your pocket $60, $80, $100 to just get a fake vinyl or a fake tape of it. So that conversation was more of a core community, hardcore community based conversation, and not, above the surface. I just feel that it felt so inauthentic to me, and it was really challenging for me because, and I keep going back to the same thing, it felt like, chasing the trend. And even rappers themselves, not toward Prince. Now, one thing about it never hurt Prince's career. It didn't do any real damage to it or anything like that. So my fears were kind of dashed, and I'm happy, about that. But the conversation that I didn't want Prince getting into after having this respect in the hip hop community was that he was integrating, rap and R&B, and the rappers themselves, chief among them, Q-Tip on Tribe Called Quest's second album, which came out, The Low End Theory came out a week before Diamonds and Pearls, talked about rap is not pop. If you call it that, just stop. De La Soul, some months earlier on De La Soul is Dead, their second album, talked about rap and bull, expletive, and talking about how this popularization of rap was distilling the authenticity of it. And I believe that really started in as early as 1986, when two events, Run DMC on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, which was the gatekeeper saying, okay, fine, we get it. You're a thing now, hip hop, rap music. Another event in the same year was that the Beastie Boys' License to Ill, their debut album, went #1 on the Billboard chart, not like the dance chart, the R&B chart or whatever, but the Billboard chart, which said that rap is viable, people will buy this music. And the slow march to popdom made rap more palatable for pop audiences. Paula Abdul, Forever Your Girl, she's got MC Scat Cat. You got, and it was just a conversation that I felt that Prince didn't need to be a part of, because I also think that he didn't necessarily understand the value of rap at that time. Now, we have way more evidence in hindsight that a lot of that wasn't necessarily true. But his first real foray as a label owner was releasing TC Ellis, which I don't think is the greatest rapper, and it just made me feel like he just didn't really get what this was, and it should be left alone. So step back, I'll take a breath. But yeah, that would be the question that I would ask, from him, like, and it's cool if if you can and you want to do it. I mean, that's okay. But I just really feel that to say that, I'm not a fan of Prince rapping is kind of some knee-jerk, reaction to it. But there was like some real context with it, because because ultimately I thought it was going to be a dent in his legacy that he didn't even need to sustain. Thank you for letting me get that out.
Here we go. I think I'll offer the B-side to that. My question would be, so where do we go from here? And this kind of was going to touch a little bit on what Arthur's saying. Excuse me. I think, so one of the things that I'm interested in is this idea of Prince's developing musical vocabulary. And I think that sometimes, because he was so amazing, we run the risk of thinking that out the gate, Prince had everything that he needed to have to create, right? And that his work in 1979, 1978, 1979, 1980 is like, excuse me. I think we've brought understood a level of sophistication that he brought to that work. And the assumption is like he has everything he needs. And I don't think that's the case. I think with each subsequent project, Prince is deepening his musical vocabulary. But what happens, I think, by 1991, and this really to me comes across in the vault, it's so expansive. It's not easy to make sense of it in one coherent statement. I think Sign of the Times and the various, kind of outtakes and vault recordings that were associated with Sign of the Times, yes, but I feel like you could still, those still were adjacent to, they were still in proximation. You have something like, Dark Side, Blood in the Sheets and Live for Love. This is widely expansive, right? And I when I was listening to the vault tracks, I was like, yeah. And then Letter from Miles. I'm like, you are going to have a tough time with genre. If you didn't have a tough time with genre before, you are really gonna, and it's because you're digging deeper into each specific kind of style of music that you have been able to integrate into your work. And so to me, that's how that would be my question to him, is like, so what are we going to do next? Because to integrate this in a way, I didn't really have such a bad or strong reactive feeling to Prince's engagement with hip hop. I think Get Off, which comes on the heels of LL's Cars Ride By with the Booming System, which is on the heels of En Vogue's Hold On to Your Love, is like, that was it. Like, I was like, okay. And then when Sexy MF comes out, I was like, okay, like you could do this. To the degree that you could do this and do it in your way, where you're almost reverse engineering the beats, right? You are, while other producers are sampling records, you are creating you're producing for loops, and you can hear some of his productions, especially on the Vault, where he is creating for loops. I think Prince's engagement with hip hop was going to be challenged by many things. One, region, right? Like, there was still a very New York and eventually New York, LA. People were not yet coming to the Midwest, right? So there's regional bias. There was gender bias. Prince's presentation of himself did not align with the kind of masculine aesthetics that hip hop was embracing. Gangster glam, uni bikini or whatever, unithong or whatever he's wearing, roller skating in that video, notwithstanding. There is a color, like the 80s was like the light skin R&B, and hip hop is very much a response to that, right? So there's a class element. A lot of the songs, like if you listen to Alice Through the Looking Glass and Streetwalker, these are very embracing middle class respectability politics as a way to critique social systems, right? But that's very different than what hip hop was doing. So there were a lot of things that I think challenged Prince's engagement with hip hop, but I appreciate that Prince was listening to the children, and that he understood, the importance of this. And I listened to it, and I don't know if Prince wrote the rap for Live for Love that's on the Vault version, but that's just a very, like, I was like, oh, he's been listening to Public Enemy, right? And I appreciate Prince doing that. I don't think, I think that I can understand why some people are like, oh, he's chasing the trends to, like, sell records. But at least as I listen to that Live for Love rap that he does, I'm like, he is actually trying to wrestle with these ideas that these young people are bringing to the fore, right? Like, when he talks about, the Nightsticks doing 4-part harmony on the brother's back. This is in March 1991, when we have just seen the video of Rodney King getting beaten, right? So I appreciate that Prince understanding that you have to speak about this, and you listen to The Voice, you listen to this is why I feel like the lyrics are much more explicit. Money Don't Matter Tonight, criticizing war for money, for profiteering. This has always been a thread in his work, but I do think, and I appreciate that hip hop, invited people into a conversation, and that Prince accepted that invitation. And sometimes it wasn't, successful to us, but that he accepted this invitation and really engaged it. So I think that what I hear in the Vault are so many different deeper dives into so many different styles of music. As I finished listening to it the first few times, I was like, now I know why you were going to have problems, because you have deepened your craft technically and artistically in these genres in ways that you had not yet done. And it's going to be really challenging for you to just be satisfied with any one project.
There's so much here. I mean, there's a substantive questions. I mean, there's a lot of fun questions I would ask him, right? Which is the like, you know, tell me about them suspenders on the bikini, roller skating around the pool. Tell me about the pants with the butt out. Because like a part of it is like, you know, what I missed was like the absurdity stuff too. Like there was a lot in this era that was just like he did what now? And it was great. It was great for me as like kind of coming out of my fandom of being like, yeah, that guy's that wild. That's what we love about him, and he's just fearless. I mean, you know, you look at like the MTV performance that left such an impression on me because it was like, you know, you had like these boring hair metal bands and whatever. The thing that people were excited about in the industry was like, you know, Guns N' Roses was about to drop 2 different albums at the same time or whatever, which is like Prince does that on a Thursday. Like, who cares? And so I think that was really, um, you know, it was fun. It was fun to see him in his element of like, by the way, I am still a giant star who knows how to shock people and make a moment and make a headline. And I'm not afraid to use that tool too, right? That's a tool that I have. So I think that's a, you know, as much as I sort of joke about it, I think there's one part that I love is like, it was transgressive, right? It was terrifying to people when he put his ass out, right? In addition to being funny and fun and entertaining and sexy and all the other things it was. You know, I'll go into a little detour about the conversation about, you know, because it's so much of the conversation about Diamonds and Pearls is about the relationship to rap and hip hop. I think one thing for folks who were not, you know, maybe weren't alive then or weren't paying attention then or didn't have as much context then, there was a lot of rap in 1990 when this album was being made around that time that was not connected to hip hop culture, right? Like you had like probably, if I had to guess, the most listened to rapper of 1990 is probably Freedom Williams with CNC Music Factory. I think that probably is the rapper that people heard the most that year. People forget that Hammer was on tour with Vanilla Ice that year. That was a joint tour. That is the thing that happened. Now, you know, the rehabilitation of Hammer from being corny to being respected is a good thing, and the reconsideration of Vanilla Ice into being a punchline is a good thing. But in that moment when this record is being made, the really, truly real fact of the world was those two guys were on tour together, and it was the biggest tour of the year, right? And I think the other thing is like, you know, so Prince is sort of, because, you know, like he can figure any genre out, he can learn anything, but he couldn't honestly claim to be from like a hip hop context. That's not where he's from, right? Is like he's navigating all this and he's observing it, and it'd be really easy because like we see the next year with he's making My Name Is Prince while, you know, touring on Diamonds and Pearls, and we see that evolution of the Cream NPG remix into the song My Name Is Prince. And yeah, there's a Bomb Squad influence on the production, but it is inarguably to me a pastiche of you know, LL's Knock You Out. From the bravado of it to the tone of it to the vocal sample, instead of building it around a Sly Stone sample, this is what we're talking about. He's building it around himself, harmonizing in the exact same way as Sly Stone is sampled in the LL song. And he's claimed Don't Call It a Comeback, right? That's the Cool J song that he's doing. My Name Is Prince and I'm funky. I think that part of it is a huge part of it. And if you're saying like, let me take all of those different inputs, you know, I'm glad there's been a sort of, you know, a little bit more charitable recontextualization of Tony M's work here, where like, you know, the guy didn't deserve a lot of the kicking that he got. But I don't listen to that first MPG album that's mostly a Tony M vocal album because it's not interesting to me. Like, I think musically it's interesting, but like, that's not of all the rap albums that came out that year, that wasn't the one for me. Right. And so I think that's the sort of thing that's interesting, is I think he was still navigating what parts of rap and hip hop culture he wanted to include, and the landscape wasn't good. Because the other part that he's working on at this time, let's not forget, is Carmen Electra's debut, which is, to me, again, unambiguously influenced by Vanilla Ice. It's like, what if you had Vanilla Ice, but it was a lady and she was hot, right? You know, like I think that's, and you know, in the same way he was talking about, let's get that Duran Duran money in the 80s. I think he's like, look, this is an audience. Proteges are for me to be able to try different things out and do the thing. and that's why her record, like the Carmen on Top, like the stuff that got cut, sounds like Vanilla Ice, right? So I think I just want to be able to sort of say there's a navigation that he's doing here, which also is probably him with his, VP of Warner Brothers hat on, which is like, let me get some product in these categories because I can, because it's interesting to try it, and it's safe because it's not my name on it. So I just think that's part of his context of like navigating what is him versus the MPG versus his proteges, and sort of, shifting that. My actual question for him would be, what was hard about this? Because this is a great album. The live performance, like I said, just lifts it to a new level for me, makes me rethink. Yes, there's no reverence. He did sample his own Adore and give it to Carmen. Like, that is a thing that happened. Like, we have to sit with that for a minute, right? In this moment, he's doing that in this time. But I come into this and say, like, what was hard about this? Because this is brilliant. There's genius all over this. There's all this incredible work, but this was not effortless. This did not feel like the thing where he just sits down and 3 minutes later. Yeah, I think of How Come You Don't Call Me? And they're like, he sat down, he did 2 takes, and there it is, and that's what you hear. This is not that. These songs that got worked. I think there's a lot of conversation. Michael Koppelman talked about the number of overdubs and samples and things they put in and took out. There are working versions of these songs that we hear on here. It's not true for a lot of the other records where it's just like one and done. This was a lot harder work. And so that's my question for him. And the thing, if this is like a murder mystery I'm trying to solve by looking at the material here and reading and listening to this material, is what was hard about this? What were you why were you putting in this much work? And what were you trying to get towards? Because you were leveling up in a way. And I think about this where, like, I don't think Diamonds and Roses is a better album than Graffiti Bridge. It's probably better regarded. I don't think we'll ever see an SDE of Graffiti Bridge, but he probably put more work into Graffiti Bridge because he put years of his life into making a film, and he used his studio and his own money and all that kind of stuff. So for him to put that much effort in again to something that was less personal in some ways than how he started with Graffiti Bridge, because this has other people on it and other contributors to it. It's a broader thing. I think that's the thing I'd love to see is, and I think late in his life, he was able to talk about when things were hard and talk about how challenges that he had. I love that openness on the Piano and Microphone tour. I don't think he was doing a lot of that at this stage, but that would be my my big question for him at this stage is, like, what made you want to work this hard again, coming off the back of a record and movie where you worked your ass off and it didn't go your way, whereas you hoped it might. And then what made you get out of your comfort zone? Because I think the other thing to really reflect on is he didn't have to do this. He could have done Purple Rain 2 and get the Lynn drum back out and, all that. Or he could have been like, let me go get Teddy Riley. And, if I could, let me get some hits. He couldn't, like, I don't think people realize that is a real thing he could have done at any time, and everybody would have jumped and said yes. And instead he's like, let me do it the hard way and go sort of deeper within myself. I think that's still the thing that blows my mind. And he did that over and over and over, where he took a much harder independent path. I think that would be my question. That's always been the question. It's like, what made you want to do this the hard way on principle, over and over and over again? Yeah, Graffiti Bridge was supposed to be Purple Rain 2, but I'm saying musically it clearly wasn't trying to be. So musically he could have been like, let me give you 5 more minutes of Baby I'm a Star. Anyway.
So real quick before we bring Elliott on, I would like to say I would love to have a Graffiti Bridge Super Deluxe edition. In fact,
I know you do. I want it for you. I'm just saying they're not going to do it.
But I just want to put that out on the record. All right, Elliott.
Okay, I'll be quick because I know that we're way over time. And also because my question is not as serious. And also my question is a question that I would probably be, if I were to ask Prince this in 91, I think I would be banned from Glam Slam. If I asked Prince this question. And it's actually a true question in the sense of it's a somewhat of a fact, but I think he would be so offended if I asked him this that like I would be banned from everything possible. But it's a question about whether or not Prince knows that strippers love his music. And he would completely, again, I would be banned from everything.
He knew.
He knew.
You tell,
Come
on now.
Well, I'm only bringing it up because this is actually, so there's an article that was written after, sort of Prince had passed by Lily Barana, who wrote this article titled "Why Strippers Love Prince." And what's interesting about that article is that she names a lot of the songs that, and she's a former stripper, the songs that they dance to, a lot of them are coming out of this era. And so I'm actually really curious about this intersection between sort of sex work and Prince's music, especially during this era. But also given some of the songs on the vault, of course, I'm thinking about Streetwalker, but obviously things, I'm also thinking about Tip of the Tongue as another kind of song, and Alice Through the Looking Glass, right? Which, obviously is dealing with peep shows, but it's also, for me, I could talk for days, and I do want to talk. I could probably ask Prince if he wanted to talk for days about that particular song, because I have so many thoughts about that song, and it's probably my favorite song on the album. Because I think it's a really interesting, complicated, complex narrative that gets sort of woven into that song. But I actually just do want to talk about Prince, ask Prince about Prince and strippers and sex work. That's actually a conversation that I want to have with him because of the songs that are coming out of this era. And the whole, sort of Caligula thing is what I'm just interested in that, right? That's what I really want to know about. That's really what I want to talk to him about if I had a chance to actually do. And then again, I think he would be really offended that I would want to have a conversation about that and I would be tossed out. But that would be my question.
Awesome. So we got to get out of here with the quickness because we're mad over. Thank you so much for everyone. Wow. You guys persisted. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'm talking about the audience members. I didn't realize this is actually one of our highest real-time attendee sessions ever. So thank you for everyone who's in the chat. Thank you all. And everybody has to go. So I'm going to say goodbye with the quickness. Thank you so much. And we're going to end that stream.